Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm so happy you've joined me today because we are traveling to a place where the map is drawn in the stories of the north of Canada. We are diving into a story that mesmerized my heart like a shimmering aurora, a narrative of a soul who refused to stay still. Today, we aren't just looking at story, we are looking at the continuity of the soul. A journey of transformation that feels like a warm dream in a frozen land. I want to invite you to sit with me as we follow this woman through the deep sea and the moonlight tundra, discovering how she lived many lives before finally returning to her own. Long before the tall ships arrive like pale ghosts on the horizon, the Inuit thrive across the Canadian Arctic, from the rocky Labrador coast to the Western Islands. They didn't just survive the ice, they danced with it, carving a resilient life out of a land that speaks in the language of the wind. Even after the arrival of colonizers and the heavy pressures of change, the heart of the Inuit nation never stopped beating. Today, in the four regions of the Inuit Nunangat, there is a beautiful and fierce reclamation of identity, keeping the ancient knowledge of their ancestors warm. It is a beautiful reminder to all of us that true roots never can be truly uprooted. In the social structure, oral traditions were the very resources that held the community together. Without a written alphabet, these stories were the living books of the elders, passed down through the steam of the heart to keep the wisdom of the past alive. These weren't just tales to the Inuit, they were the moral and spiritual laws that maintained the balance between humans and the spirits. This way, a single story could act as a vessel for survival skills and ancestral story all at once. In a world of white silence, storytelling was an act of preservation, a way of ensuring that the essence of the Inuit soul remained as immutable and enduring as the ancient permafrost beneath their feet. The man who helped bring these sacred northern whispers to the rest of the world was Knud Rasmussen. He was a visionary Greenlandic Danish explorer who, between 1902 and 1924, led the legendary Fifth Thule expedition across the top of the world. Rasmussen wasn't just mapping coastlines, he was mapping the human spirit, meticulously documenting the folklore of the Inuit and other First Nations. His work, like the people of the Polar North and Eskimo folk tales, is where is found the raw power of today's story. He had this deep respect for the indigenous voice, ensuring that the clattering of spiritual stories wasn't lost to time. He understood that to save a story is to save the map of a people's soul. Rasmussen was fascinated by how these stories serve as functional maps for the invisible geography. The idea that in the Arctic, where a blizzard can erase the horizon, a story about a skeletal ghost or a spirit bear provides a landmark for the mind. To the Inuit, the world isn't a dead, material thing. It's a living entity where every jagged rock and every whitened bone have a real world meaning. By knowing these stories, a hunter could navigate not just the snow, but the spiritual hazards of the landscape. These legends created a sense of home in a place that looked desolate to outsiders, transforming the wilderness into a populated neighborhood where every shadow had a story to tell. Today, I want to tell you about the stunning story of the soul that lives in every animal. This narrative comes from Rasmussen 1921 collection, and it tells of a great shaman whose soul embarked on a cycle of incarnations across the entire animal kingdom. It explores the concept of the joint soul, the tiny, perfect essence that lives in the hollows of our bones and travels from one house of flesh to another. In this history, we see the world through the eyes that are not human, learning that the soul is a traveler and the body is just a temporary dwelling. It is a journey of stripping away the ego to find the eternal structure of the spirit beneath. And the story is being told by the shaman herself. My journey began beneath the waves. I did not slip into the skin of a seal. I became the seal, the salty ocean filling my lungs as easily as warm air. I felt the pulse of the sea as a supporting embrace, the pressure of the deep feeling like a comforting weight against my ribs. I knew the supernatural thirst that salt water creates, and I spent my days swimming through the darkness, navigating not by sight but by the fantastic geometry of the currents. My soul waited at the edges of the breathing holes, seeking the respectful hunter who would honor our sacred contract. When he offered me the ritual drop of fresh water, I gave him my flesh in return, my spirit lingering just long enough to ensure my bones remained whole. Then I was a wolf, the powerful Amarok. As I ran with the pack across the moonlit permafrost, I did not just run, I flowed. My soul did not sit in my heart, it sat in my joints, steering the machinery of my body with a fierce, collective intelligence. I felt the powerful architecture of my skeleton as my only defense, knowing that a single broken bone was a leak where my spirit would eventually escape. I did as the wolves did, chasing the wind and smelling the fear on the weak caribou from miles away. I felt the Lord of Strength wrestling within me, shaking out the bad bonds that make a creature slow. Each muscle in my frame was a poem of survival written in fur, until the hunter finally set me free. I became a caribou, and my world shifted into a rhythm of constant motion. I felt my soul reside in the small of my back, a concentrated point of energy that let me sense the weight of a shadow. My life was a clattering song, the clinking of my hooves against the tundra sounding to my own ears like rattling dry sticks. I felt the call of the great herd as a biological force, a single drop in a river of fur, an antler that navigated the shifting white geography by instinct alone. I was a graceful creature of habit, moving with the seasons and the sacred geometry of the sky, doing as the caribou do, until I was ready to leave the caribou shell behind. From the large herds, I shifted into the cunning, solitary life of a fox. This was a life of secrets, a burrowing into the snow and blending to the white landscape like a shadow made of frost. I felt the world primarily through the sensitive pads of my paws and my twitch of my large ears, learning the magical geography of the small things, the hidden tunnels of lemmings and the cracks in the ancient ice. I did as the foxes did, a master of invisibility, feeling the cold air not as a threat but as a clarity. Each life was a lesson in stripping away the unnecessary, preparing my soul for the heavier weight of the larger spirits that were waiting for me in the north. I touched the pinnacle of physical power in the life of the bear, the Nanook. As a bear, I possessed a soul so large it filled every bone in my massive frame. I lived as a solitary wanderer, the great lonely one, possessing the patience to stand still as a statue for hours at a breathing hole, waiting for the seal's breath. I felt the ground vibrate with my own power, the white gale of the Arctic feeling only like a soft touch against my thick fur. I possess a dignity that few creatures ever know, moving through the world with a slow, powerful confidence. When I was eventually killed, I left the bear's body with a profound sense of pride, having touched the ultimate structure of strength. Then my soul dove back into the icy depths to take the heavy, tough form of a walrus. I moved through the bones of the sea, the submerged rocks and icebergs, experimenting a life of crushing pressure and watery silence. I felt the incredible weight of my tusk, not as a burden, but as a tool that anchored me to the physical world, allowing me to speak to the deep sea. I lived among the walrus herds on the drifting ice floes, my life measured by the sound of the crashing waves and the guttural calls of my kin. I was a heavy soul in a heavy body, doing as the walruses did, until the hunter's harpoon finally set my spirit free to seek the shore once more. Finally, I chose to become a small seal again. I knew that the small seal is the most frequent visitor to human villages, and I wanted to finish my long journey and return to my original form. I stayed close to the breathing holes, wanting to be caught so my soul could be near the warmth of the seal oil lamps and the sound of human laughter. I felt the world as a curiosity, a playful interaction between the ice and the shore. I allowed myself to be taken by a hunter, ensuring my soul was brought into the heart of a home. I had finished my long journey through the animals, and I was finally ready to carry their secrets back into the world of men. After experiencing the wild freedom of the wolf and the crushing death of the walrus, I decided to be a human again. I realized that while animals live the truth in silence, only as a human could I speak the wonders I had seen. My soul waited in a woman's water bucket, a shimmering spark of memory, and I entered this world when she took a deep thirst drink. I was born as a girl who did not forget. I carried the vision of my past lives, able to see the soul sitting inside the seal and the ancient skeleton hidden within the heart of the mountain. I came back not just to live, but to be the bridge that reminds my people of who they truly are. Because I remember every vibration of my animal lives, I naturally became an Angakuk, a great magician of the north. My power was born from the joint soul that had traveled through every creature on earth and sea. I became the bridge between the humans and the spirits I had once been. I traveled to the bottom of the sea to comb Sedna's hair because I still feel the salt in my skin. And I call the caribou because I still hear the clicking of their hooves on my own dreams. I'm a healer of relationships, ensuring we honor the sacred contract of the hunt. My illumination is a light that comes with dying 1,000 times and returning, proving that the soul finds a home in every living thing. And thank you so much for joining me on this Odyssey. This Inuit legend reminds us that we are never truly separate from the nature around us. We are different houses for our eternal and divine spark. I think the lesson here is that empathy is born from memory, when we remember that we are part of a larger living entity. We treat every rock and every neighbor with the reverence they deserve. Please, Like and subscribe if you enjoy this journey into the magical realism of the North. Until next time, may you find the inner light of your own story. Keep exploring the roots of the North because that's where magic lives. See you later, alligator.